Welcome, everybody, to Make It Make Sense. It's Wow Wednesday. I'm so thankful that you are joining us here where we do exactly what the title says. We endeavor to make it make sense. Anything that is confusing, areas where you need clarity, things that you may want more information from an expert about, or you're really just like, all of this is nonsense. Help me. You know what? I feel the exact same way. I think the exact same thoughts. We're all going through some of the same emotions, though different things are affecting different people at different levels. But here, in this space, in this safe space where you can get your questions answered, where we're not interested in all of that back and forth that you're seeing more and more on mainstream media, we are about facts and data. And yes, when we give you opinions, they're supported by facts and data. And today is no different at all. I want to talk a good bit about the heightened ratcheting up of attacks on education by the Trump administration. And when I say by the Trump administration, I mean by the president, by President Trump, by the people who are working for him, by Elon Musk, the co-president, and the things that they are doing in order to dismantle the Department of Education. But to also be clear, when we say attacks on education, that's not some amorphous thing like education is some pie in the sky concept. This means attacks on students who desperately need services. This means attacks on teachers and on thousands and thousands of jobs, which means attacks on families of American citizens who have a right to a free and appropriate public education. And that is what is at stake. And we're not just seeing it at the preschool, Head Start, elementary, middle school, high school level. We're seeing it in colleges. And thankfully, this week, one of the majors decided to fight back. But you know what? I'm not going to talk to you about all of this by myself. I phoned a friend. I am so excited for my Persist sister, public school educator in New York, history teacher, writer, content creator, and all around badass. Sari Beth Rosenberg is joining us for the first time on Make It Make Sense. Welcome, Sari.
It is such an honor to be here. And I am on my spring break. And I had to take a little break from my spring break. I was getting my nails done. And it's just a joy and an honor to be here with you today, talking about something that we need. It's hard to make sense of, but let's try to make some sense of it today.
Yeah. And you're right about it. It's hard to make sense of. It is nonsense, the way that these things are happening. But I also believe, Sari, that some of it is targeted. You know, it was all discussed in Project 2025, and we were sounding the alarm, trying to get people to hear us, believe us. And now we're watching the rollout of it. And one of the primary things that I think that people don't realize is there is a targeted attempt to make us dumb. They don't want us to understand history, which is one of your prime subjects, but they don't want us to be educated, period.
They really don't. And I've been screaming about this since 2021 when I was screaming about it. Let's go back in time a little, because I'm a history teacher. As Trump was leaving his first presidency, even though he didn't want to, we can talk about that another time. They dropped something called the 1776 Commission. And I have a group chat with my social studies friends here in New York City. And we were not freaking out about it because we knew he was leaving and this was not going to be in federal anywhere near the Department of Education. But we were reading through it. And then fast forward a year or so later, as COVID was dying down, not dying down, but schools were opening up. And we started looking at how they were attacking public schools in a whole new way, which was the quote unquote CRT divisive issues laws, bills and laws that we saw in various states across this country. I've lost count, but it's 30 plus, maybe 35 plus schools, states across this country started adopting these anti-CRT. But really, let's be honest, what were they? They were replicas of the whitewashed, sanitized version of American history that we all were joking about in the 1776 Commission. This is not real history. This is an attempt to erase the stories of the American people. And now, unfortunately, 77 million people voted for Donald Trump and his administration. You're a part of the 92% that didn't vote for him. I'm a part of a smaller majority of white women who did vote for him. But I'm a part of the majority of American history teachers and educators and parents and students across this country who are outraged over the fact that now they're trying to impose this on all schools across the country. And it's absolutely horrific, and it's anti-democratic, and it's anti-American.
Well, and here's the thing. We've been talking in a lot of different circles recently that I don't think people understand. One of the first steps to erasing a people is erasing the history of the people. You know, we've seen this with the attacks on the National African American History Museum. They're wanting to remove slavery, the mention of slavery, from the museum because, and people call it whitewashing, they call it blackwashing, whatever. It's more than that. It is that when you get people to a point where there's no touch point they can go to learn about, to remember, to be informed about their history, then they become, you know, like a subclass, non-defined group of people that are just supposed to blend into the background. There are no distinguishing characteristics, there's no culture, there's no pride. And that's why I think that what you do for your students is so important. I love when I'm seeing your videos, when you're teaching topics that frankly in some states now they can't. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like, and if you are in communication with teachers who are already being censored and what they can share with their students?
Absolutely. So it's a point of privilege right now that I can teach the full true history of America every day in my classrooms. And I pause on it every single day. And I think about my brothers and sister educators across this country who feel silenced. And just going back to what you were talking about, these, we call them memory laws, right? Like Timothy Snyder, an excellent academic and scholar who everyone is reading these days, among some others, he wrote.
Wait, no, say the name again. We're all learning, Sari.
Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, let's make it make sense. So Timothy Snyder is a historian that everyone should be reading. He has a Substack, but he also wrote a New York Times article a few years ago, and it's all about the history of memory laws in countries that were dictatorships, like the Soviet Union. And he unravels and unpacks how one of the first steps in becoming an authoritarian regime is they attack the education system. They attack the teaching of the truth. And I think it's important what you just said, that this is not whitewashing, it's erasure. And it's also a distortion of the true story of this country, and it's intentional and on purpose. Now let's talk about the fact that there are, I just looked this up to double check, there are nearly 50 million kids enrolled in K through 12 public schools across this country. Right? It's actually gone down a bit since COVID, but that's still a very considerable amount of kids. And I think, Horace Mann said public schools can be the great equalizer. They can also be the great divider. And speaking about what I teach in my classes versus what maybe a student in Texas or Florida will not be learning now, I start the year off by naming it systemic racism. We talk about the history of race versus racism, how racism came first, then race. We unpack it right away. We do not sugarcoat the story of America. We talk about the complexity of America. We talk about what we did to the indigenous people. We call it settler colonialism, which most academics, all academics, people who actually study history and aren't trying to distort it, would agree. It was called settler colonialism, something we can talk about. We talk about race-based chattel slavery. We talk about the origins of it. We talk about the invention of race. These are all things that are not me being a woke teacher trying to indoctrinate and groom my kids into hating America. You know what it actually does? When I get to the stories of Shirley Chisholm right behind me, or Mumbet Freeman, Elizabeth Freeman, she is someone who back during the American Revolutionary days overheard her master reading things like the Declaration of Independence, and she said, I'm here in Massachusetts. What does that not apply to me? And she sued for her freedom. That's not in the AP US curriculum. That's not in most curriculums, but it's in my
Say her name again.
Mum
Say it
Bet
again.
Freeman. Mum Bet
Yep.
Freeman. Elizabeth Freeman, Mumbet Freeman. I think I have a young adult book behind me. These are the stories we need to tell, right? These are the stories that, you know what happens when you hear that story? It makes you actually appreciate the story of America. We need to understand both the challenges and the promise of this country. And when you get rid of the challenges and the kids know, you know what the kids say to me a lot of times? And this is in New York City, where I think they're being taught much more truthful history than other places. When they get to 11th grade US history, how come I never learned this? How come I never learned this? Or they'll come to me with a TikTok, Miss, why haven't we learned this yet? So they can, and that's probably why they're going after things like social media for the wrong reasons. The kids are going to learn this, right? But they're trying to make it more and more difficult for them to learn it where they go every day.
Yeah.
And this is just, it's, and that was one of the things that I started freaking out about the day that I realized that Trump was going to be the one, because this was his plan. But it's really all the Republicans at this point.
Tell me this, because I am hearing, and I can't get to the truth of it.
Yeah.
Because I know that there are just certain things that are state by state by state.
Right.
A good bulk of our funding is state funding for educational system, for at least pre-K through 12 education.
Yeah.
And it does affect curriculums as well. But people keep saying that civics and government are no longer being taught and haven't been taught for years. Is that a state by state thing? Because I remember I was on this platform and one of the speakers was saying, well, it's impossible to get people to care about certain things about voting and what the vote does and why it matters and electoral college and all of these things when they don't have a basic civics course and Schoolhouse Rock isn't on TV anymore. So does that mean, like, when I took AP government, and when we had history courses and also government, that there's no longer government, that there's no longer civics, or what's happening?
So I think that what's happening is it's state by state basis. And I think it goes back to No Child Left. I'm such a history teacher, a little historical context. Let's talk about No Child Left Behind. More and more money was taken away from social studies education, and the emphasis was on English, math, which is, yes, I agree. We need to focus on those things. But I think what got kind of put to the wayside, was social studies education. And I think we're seeing the full effects of that decades later. When I was, especially so basically, and it's state by state, right? So every state has their own curriculum. And that's why I always laugh when people are like, oh, you're indoctrinating the kids with your curriculum. No, Google it. You can look up the New York State curriculum. I'm teaching it. Like, me teaching about Mumbet Freeman falls under the New York State and New York City framework, right? But I think what's happening is, because money has been taken away from social studies education, including teacher training and workshops, right, which is we're going to lose even more as they defund the Department of Education and try to get rid of it. What you start seeing is that if it's on a state by state basis, some states don't, some school districts don't offer AP government. They might not offer AP US history. And if they do, as we know, even though there's this
But
AP,
are they offering basic
but that,
government?
and
Like, is it
right.
a
And so
part of it?
let me back up, right? So like this is on a state by state basis, right? So if you take AP government, AP US, these are national courses. But if you're in a state like Oklahoma, it's not necessarily guaranteed that that is what's going to be taught in the school, right? And so New York City, for example, we have the New York City Region's curriculum. And for US history, there is a civics portion of it. We also have a civics for all portion. We have a government course that kids, it's a semester long course they take as seniors. They work on a bunch of different projects where they learn government. So this is the problem, right? And so Trump is saying he wants to leave it up to the states. Well, leaving it up to the states has deeply hurt our civics and government education across the country. So it's just luck, if you're born in a state like New York and you have this curriculum, great, but it's not mandated across the country because we don't have a mandated curriculum. So I think it is accurate to say that overall, government and civics education has decreased as a result of No Child Left Behind, and then the program that Obama introduced, right? And I really hope this administration is a wake-up call on many levels, including the need for funding social studies education. This is all about critical thinking. It's literacy. You can include math there when you talk about statistics. It's integral to creating and producing and inspiring citizens.
Well,
Informed
yeah, and
citizens.
it's critical to an informed electorate
Yes,
also,
yes,
because and that's why I say so much of it has to be by design. And we look at states that have some of the poorest communities that depend like on blue state funding to survive, right?
right.
The way that we all pay in our taxes in this tax structure, but the children are not getting the benefit. And so to me, that affects whether you want to run for office or not, because I can remember,
Yeah,
obviously I was always interested in political science and those things, but I was looking forward to these courses the most
yes,
because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I knew I wanted to come to DC and I wanted to be working on Capitol Hill. I wanted to be moving and shaking throughout all of these DC streets and all of these things. But my appetite for that was nourished through the education that I received in the lower grade levels. Now, I, of course, had benefits in that before high school, I was attending private schools, and private schools did have some of these things that the
right.
public schools did not. But to me, that again just shows how classes end up separating, and
Yes,
you only end up with as much education as you can pay for. And then you have people who aren't running for office, aren't voting, aren't speaking up locally, statewide, or nationally because they haven't been taught that it matters. Like when you said that Elizabeth Freeman sued for her freedom, people don't even know that's a thing.
no, nope,
And we're watching that in real time with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. We're
yes,
watching people have to sue for due process for the right to their own body, as if we are in the 1800s.
right. And also it's basic things. And this is not me trying to sound, it shouldn't be elitist to say that everyone should understand how checks and balances work. And if I say Article 1,
Yeah.
they know that's Congress, right? And right, so like it's this whole idea, and like that was intentional. That was the first part of the Constitution that they worked on, right? The role of checks and balances, the fact that we were just fresh off a tyrant, right? The word tyranny was in everyone's mind when they were drafting that Constitution, and it's just horrifying to me that people in this country don't even understand and the importance of government.
Yeah.
I was using it, like I was saying the other day, that it's like people never learned about it and they're learning about it as it's disappearing. They took it for granted, like that spouse you have that's always there for you and then suddenly isn't there making you dinner at night. making sure you're getting to work on time, and you're like, oh, maybe I did need that, right?
Mhm.
And again, it goes back to memory loss. The less educated the general population is, the easier it is to have these leaders like Donald Trump and those who are following him into this abyss of authoritarianism.
Well, memory loss is going to be on my brain.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that people who watch this are learning things or being reminded of things that are so important. I just have two more questions.
Yeah.
This April is Autism Awareness, Acceptance, Inclusion
Yeah.
Month, and obviously I have a child who's on the spectrum, so I've been on these fights and these trails for a long time now, but there are direct and disproportionate effects to this dismantling of the Department of Education and the funding that comes from the Department of Education in the way that it impacts the special needs student community and their teachers. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, who gets hurt the most with these cuts? It's the most vulnerable of our population, right? It's going to cut the funding for paraprofessionals who are there to support our kids who have these special needs in the schools. Again, I see it at my school. If we were to start losing that funding, I can directly think of kids and their beautiful faces who aren't, and it's making me choke up, who are not going to get the care and assistance they deserve so they can get an equal education to their peers. My school is one of the most diverse schools, a truly diverse school, meaning like all different kids from all parts of the city, all different learning levels, all different abilities. And it's a beautiful environment because everyone accepts each other. And that has to do with the support systems that are in place for the kids so they can get the support they need so they can function at their best in these classrooms, right? And
Yeah.
when you take that funding away, you are destroying the future and just the daily life of these kids, their self-esteem, their mental health, their physical health. It's outright cruel. And that's why I'm so proud that my union, the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, is suing. I think they have like 3 or 4 lawsuits right now over these cuts and the threats of getting rid of more and more of these services, right? It breaks my heart that unless, and this is going to hurt everyone, people who voted for Trump, people who didn't vote, and
Right.
people who didn't vote for Trump, right? It doesn't
Right.
matter who you voted for. And people in these rural communities are going to get hit just as they do in urban communities across the country. And either they're going to have to increase taxes on people or just choose not to. And our special needs kids, our autistic kids who deserve every bit of education as everyone else, are going to get really hurt here. And it's a travesty.
Right. And see, one of the understandings and the disinformed lanes
Yeah.
that exist throughout this country is that children in the special needs population can't learn and improve and thrive given the proper supports. And
Yeah.
that's why FAPE means free and appropriate public education. People are supposed to get an IEP, an individualized education plan, and figure out not what any student with autism needs, not what any student with language delay or physical delay needs, but what that particular student needs. And the school system is supposed to figure out a way to do as much of that as they possibly can. And all of that is at risk
Yeah.
here, at every last bit of it. So, last question,
Yeah.
girl, what can we do? What can we do?
Well,
Because it's too much,
so
Sari.
overwhelming. I mean, honestly, I think the most tangible thing is educate everyone you know about this. Now, is that going to change what Trump's doing? No, but I think could potentially lead to people making phone calls and speaking out and going through their town hall meetings and demanding that they do not remove that this is up to Congress, like checks and balances. Trump can pass an executive order, but it's up to Congress to pass a bill that he will definitely sign to get rid of the Department of Education. I think it's really important. I think there's still many Americans, and they probably are your neighbors, unfortunately, who need to be educated. The Department of Education is not designing curriculum. I think that's what they think. They don't realize that everything from services to help our special needs kids, autistic kids, Autism Awareness Month. Shout out to that. And also even civil rights issues. It's teacher trainings. Which leads to teacher retention. You know, it's so many, you know, also
it's Head
there's
Start.
it's Head
It's
Start.
lunch
It's
programs.
student loan assistance. It's so much more. It's the majority, like the Title I funding is a part of it. Also, just like research, it's the people that they've cut right now are the ones who are researching and studying the different districts to see what needs they have for these services, right?
Yep.
And this, I think it's so education. I'm a big believer in just educating people and calling them in, not calling them out, going to your town hall meetings, pressuring your legislators, especially if you're in states where you feel like your lawmakers are going to vote against this. Show up to your school board meetings, run for school board. If that's too much, show up, because Moms for Liberty and all those groups are showing up in your district, and they're not even from there, and they're making all the noise, and they're making it seem as if they want, your district wants these changes. You need to show up. You need to turn out. This is the time. This is your time. Like, if you're listening to this, this is your sign. It does, and that they want to make us feel, I know you talk about this all the time, they want to make us feel disempowered. They want to make us feel like there's nothing we can do. And we can't, and yes, there are a lot of levers of this government right now that we don't have control over. Like, basically, I would say all three branches. But the Constitution starts off with the preamble, which says, we the people. And it's we the people who need to turn up to, like, I was just watching Senator Grassley's town hall meeting yesterday, and I'm sorry,
that was freaking amazing.
And they came in there with their facts, and
They sure did.
they're not opinions, facts. And he didn't know what to say.
And it dispelled, I know it's not our topic for the day, but I think it's where you're talking about people being educated, and when they get the facts, then they care.
Yes.
It dispelled these nasty myths that just because people are living in a red state and have a certain set of point of views on certain topics, that they don't give a damn about other people,
right,
like the immigrant who they were speaking out for, you know, Kilball, or that they don't care about due process and rule of law, because people are starting to get the fact that, if you're willing to do that to him, I'm right next door.
Right. And what happens when I decide that I don't want to comply with you? Am I going to get sent to one of these? Am I going to be considered a homegrown? Right.
Right.
And I know this seems off topic, but it's not, because if you're not educated about the past, then you're in for quite a surprise as this unfolds. If you don't study the history, read Hannah Arendt, read Timothy Snyder, read, I think it's Jason Stanley. There's three actual Yale professors who are.
How do we spell Hannah's last name?
Hannah, Hannah Hannah Arendt. She was writing about fascism as it was taking root in Germany and Italy in the pre-war, between the wars era. And we need to read this history, because we are experiencing elements of it, a lot of them right now. And educate yourself. That's the best thing you can do right now.
Well, Sarah, you are welcome here anytime.
Yay.
I appreciate you. Shout out to the Persist Network just
Shout
for bringing us together. And man, in a short period of time, we have seen some tracks and some trails, and are in the fight together. Please tell people where they can find you.
They can find me, Sari Beth Rose on Instagram, and I'm still on X. I'm Sari on Blue Sky, and follow my Substack. It's my name, and my Substack's called Yo Miss, because that's what the kids call you in New York City public schools, Yo Miss. So that's my Substack, because my students have inspired me to do everything I'm doing today. So it's a shout out to them. And thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Enjoy your spring break.
I know, I need to go back to spring breaking.
Yes, we appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Guys, Sari Beth Rosenberg has become very special to me.
I love you.
short amount of time, and I am so thankful just for the work that she is doing. If you're not following her already, go to IG, catch her videos, go to her Substack, Yo Miss, as she said. And she really, to me, in many ways, represents what this moment has to be about. Yes, she is a white Jewish woman who is fighting to teach civil rights as part of American history in the public school system. Those are the sisters, the allies, the friends, the colleagues that we need. And we're a fool if we don't recognize that and work together with people with whom we have common goals. And she certainly is one of those out here in these content creator streets. So I urge you to please follow her stuff and support her in whatever way you can. Speaking of support, I appreciate your support here. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Monique Pressley channel. If you have not subscribed already, please like this video and other videos that we're putting out. Please share them and share the information. The goal, as I said at the top, and I'll say again, is to help you make things make sense. We want to make it make sense amidst all of the nonsense and all of the intentional cruelty and all of the things that are trying to tear down really what this country is about, but also what freedom is about. And we're doing our part here to fight back. If you are joining us, please keep coming back here. And until tomorrow, noon Eastern, stay safe out there.